As men, we all have egos, and we sometimes don't like talking about messing up or our regrets, okay? This is the biggest thing. This is why people take more drugs. This is why people have more drink, because they haven't accepted that what they're doing doesn't work. Something has to change. But first of all, for it to change, you've got to accept it's not working. And then when you realise in yourself what it is, you've then got to be brave enough to take that secret or that thing that because you need to take drugs, you do bad things, gambling, you hide it. That's what makes it bad, right? But when you can actually go out and you can tell someone, have a conversation with them and challenge that conversation, because you'll know this, when you talk to someone who's denying addiction, they're going to be constantly putting it to the back step. They're going to be avoiding you. They're going to talk about it. They're going to be in a situation where every other thing can be on the table, but facing the problem, the elephant in the room is the one thing they're going to be hopping around in. But the minute you turn and say, well, you know what? I would have come out of this situation. And you say, here's my hand, my brother. I'm going to help pull you up.
Every man carries something. Expectations, silence, struggles, the weight of having to look unbreakable. The Dad Project is a home for real, unfiltered conversations on men's mental health, the kind that have been missing for far too long. We share powerful stories and raw perspectives from those living it and those guiding men through it. Filmed at the Old Court in Windsor, it's about breaking silence, reshaping strength, and creating conversations that actually matter. I'm your host, Naroop Juti. Let's talk. Before we start, let me take 30 seconds and speak to you directly. This podcast exists to share real stories, honest conversations that inspire growth, self-belief, and meaningful change. If you get value from these episodes, following or subscribing is the easiest way to support what we're building here. It helps this reach more people who appreciate authentic conversation, and it allows us to keep creating stories like this. All right, thank you for being here. Now, into the episode. Andrew.
Naroop, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Excellent.
You've lived several lives in one lifetime. When you look back now, what is the one moment that made everything shift inside you?
I think if any specific moment, was to be taken in my life, and believe me, there have been many, where something has just suddenly made sense, I think it dawned on me in prison. But it wasn't, as people would say, in prison I felt bad, I felt sorry. It was a particular visit one day, and my sister came up to visit me. I was at HMP Belmarsh, high security prison, a category A, and my father came up with my sister. And when he walked in to the visit hall, I saw a broken man, and I had a flashback, and I saw this man that, was so strong growing up. And I remember him, he'd been a builder, a bricklayer all his life. As a child, I used to go, and help carry bricks, it was a little kind of job. And I saw him as, this central figure and strong person, and seeing him age and, being weak, middle-age spread, and not being able to hear properly. I looked at him and I thought to myself, what I've done is actually destroyed you. You're a great man, and my actions are actually destroying you. And for that moment, it was a moment of my life I'd lived. It was pure selfishness. It was all about me. It was a vanity project. It was, take risks with no consequences. And I realised, did it make sense, what I'd done, what had I achieved?
Did he ever used to talk to you about your life, your dad, what you were doing, while you were doing
My
it?
dad was a very proud, caring man, and he was loved by everybody because of his nature. He didn't see colour, didn't see white, didn't see black. He just saw people. He was a very fair man, an honest man, incredibly honest. And, I think he would do everything to root for me and help me. But he never approved of my lifestyle. And being of mixed race heritage, it's difficult, I think, and people don't understand it to a degree. That when you have parents, one coming from one particular part of the world, another from the other, you're grown up and you learn two different cultures, which is a wonderful thing. But sometimes you can be disconnected a little bit.
Well, from either side.
You can become, because you do have patterns.
Yeah.
Growing up, I did, I was dominantly black, I was dominantly white, dominantly black. And it happens like that because your groups of friends shift and change. And the dynamics can affect your parents. Because when you move across the ones, what you talk, how you communicate, suddenly it doesn't, respond or reciprocate with them, perhaps in a way that they would expect. And I think to a degree, he felt that he'd lost me at elements, and I regret a lot of it, because there were some times in my life I should have really communicated more with my dad and, spoke to him openly and honestly, because he was a non-judgmental man about my life. Whereas my mum, it was a bit different, because she was just a strong Jamaican woman, and me and her used to go head to head. And, she was more or less, she knew what I was all about. Do you know what I mean? She didn't, there was no flies on it. I couldn't just trick her. She used to laugh. Your dad's got cotton wool over his eyes. You've got no idea what you like. I know exactly what you like. You're a little devil. Do you know what I mean? And she see the signs coming. But again, parents don't see, the bad in their kids. They always see the good in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the moment that I think that really the sort of, wake up call was seeing my dad walk into that visit hall,
That's really powerful. What you shared there about being of mixed background, how you have to almost shift and adapt. I've never thought of that, about how, okay, I guess you do have to make a choice at some point, don't you? Like, who am I?
Yeah.
I can't be two people. I am me, right? And it's confusing for you as well. Where do I lay in this world? Is that what influenced the life that you led early on, would you say?
I think the question you just said is a question every mixed race is asked at some point in their life. What side of the fence are you on? And the second question is, who am I? And it takes a long while to understand who you are or become you, more to the point. And like anything, as a young person, not having any brothers is another big thing as well, because if you have brothers sometimes who have walked through that path that you're going to go through, they can maybe navigate you. They say the easiest way to walk through a minefield without getting blown up is follow the person's footsteps in front of you, successfully done it, right? So I didn't have that. I had to step on a few mines and blow myself up a few times. And, it was, it was lack of guidance to begin with, because you're looking for people, you will take direction sometimes from people who necessarily, as a young person, you look for excitement, okay? That's a natural thing. And you will sometimes steer towards things you think are exciting. And that can lead you on a wrong path. And if you don't know when to pull the brakes, it can inevitably end, and it will end death, destruction, and misery, or a long prison sentence. And in my case, the only thing that didn't happen was death, thank God, but all the others I passed through. But yeah, I think mixed race is even more difficult, because identity can be something you have to be able to find where you belong. Back then it was especially like that, not so much now because there are so many of us out there. But, we're talking about growing up in the, mid-60s, when I was born, the 70s, which is a very kind of fractured time in Britain.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a parent now? I'm just thinking, if someone is always in a mixed marriage, right? What advice would you give them to how to raise their children so they don't feel that they have to be two separate people, that they can feel they can just be themselves? Is there any advice you think you could give?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to, as soon as you can, as early as you can, introduce your child to both cultures. That's very, very important. My parents done that to me, but introducing someone to a culture and get them to really understand it is a different thing. So, I think educate your kids about that, great. Education at school is brilliant, but educating is from a parent's perspective. What you can instill and teach your child is greater than any teacher can do, because you can teach them life experiences, what you've gone through.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the only advice I can give. Take mistakes you've made and try your children not to make the same mistakes. But don't lecture, don't preach.
Yeah.
Just explain.
Yeah. And let them make a decision, right? Let them find their way.
They have to find their own way.
Yeah.
But just explain why it will go wrong. Not it goes wrong, it goes wrong. Explain what goes wrong.
Yeah. When we had a conversation before this podcast, we had discussed how you've been on many podcasts.
Yeah.
And you've told your story many times about
yeah.
the life you lived. And I want to touch on it briefly to give our viewers and listeners a insight into your life. But the real aim of this conversation is to talk about the work you're doing now, how you reformed, and all the amazing ways you're contributing positively to other people's lives. As a young man, you got yourself into a bit of trouble, didn't you? Right?
To put it mildly, yeah.
If you were to give someone like a highlights reel, a paint a quick picture as to the things that happened in your life that made you end up in prison at the time when you saw your dad,
I guess.
What would you say were some of the big things that happened to you?
Well, I guess if you were to give a really quick snapshot of my life, chronological order, I guess it starts when I'm about 15 years old, start to become, distant from school, skip school, bunk off, find myself fascination or love for sound system culture, get heavily involved in the Afro-Caribbean sound system circuit, become a sound system operator, and start to put in illegal blues parties. By the turn of the late 1980s, I then become a warehouse party promoter, become one of the biggest of the acid house scene, become, basically being chased and hunted down by a special task force which was set up by Margaret Thatcher at the time to stop party promoters from doing events like that. Then at the end of that kind of, reign of hugely successful warehouse parties, I then moved into the underbelly of crime and got involved in the distribution of ecstasy tablets and created a massive distribution network across Britain. And then I went on the run to Jamaica. When I went to Jamaica, I got involved in 2 relationships where I had 2 sons. One was for Miss Jamaica World. The other child I had was with, she's dead now, her father was a prominent politician. And then I was drawn into the whole, understanding and the dynamics of Jamaica from every angle you could possibly imagine. Returned to England. I then got involved in smuggling of an industrial scale. 2004, I was arrested for £100 million worth of cocaine, half a metric ton, biggest seizure at the time. Where I was arrested, I went to Wandsworth Prison, done 2 very, controversial trials. A documentary was made in real time during the time I was in prison, which was then aired. When finally the 2 cases basically fell apart due to a police corruption scenario that happened, where I'd paid off illegal corrupt police who stole public interest community documents about the case, which I took into court and basically created havoc within the courtroom environment. After that, I released a book about parts of my life. I then moved from there. I went back into smuggling because I wasn't rehabilitated. I earned several £1 million from smuggling. I moved away to Essex and built a film studio and other businesses. I invested in various businesses, restaurants, and had very high-profile business partners from different legitimate worlds. And I was arrested again in 2013. This time was for a much smaller quantity of drugs. And at that occasion, I was given 15 years in prison. And I also underfell a large confiscation order. I was also caught up with the corruption case with the police and what I'd done. And that was it pretty much. But during my time in incarceration, that was when my life changed. And that was the magical moment I told you about when I first see my father go in, and I asked myself the first question, what's it all about? And a series of questions then came to me. One was seeing young people, you know, coming in there doing these huge life sentences. Many of them I knew their parents or their older relatives. And it all made no sense to me. But I felt responsible because these guys were killing each other over postcode gang wars, but effectively a lot of related to drugs. And I'd successfully, in my eyes, you know, over the years brought in, you know, huge amounts of metric tons of drugs and never came in contact with kids like that, but they were killing each other on the street for tiny little grams.
Okay, so I want to stop you there because you discussed this with me on the phone. And what I wanted to know was, why did that matter to you at that moment? What happened where you looked around and thought, you know, these kids shouldn't be killing themselves. I've done this for so long. What made you actually care at that moment? Because that really did start to lead to you creating one postcode, and we'll talk all about that. But why did you care? Realisation,
I have 3 sons. You know, 2 live in America. So, you know, they'd passed through that. I have a youngest son, Hayden, who at the time he was there, you know, with his mother. I was in prison. And I saw the journey and the chain of these kids. They were young, they were getting involved in gangs, they were getting caught up in it, they were getting ruined to gangs. And it was a realisation that something had to be done about it, because I realised that the authorities had no understanding of it. No one really cared. But what I saw with my own eyes was a lie. A lie was being told to young people, and this is what bringing them into gangs, you know. And the people, to me, who, you know, it was a chain, had to be broken, you know, because any child could fall into that trap. And you know, it was selfish, because I thought I wouldn't want my kids getting involved in that. But also, another great thing was I'd realised that, you know, my life at that stage, kids were looking and thinking it was a great life because it had been glamorised in a book, it had been glamorised on television. And if I didn't do something to tell the truth about it, people would probably, whole chain of kids, follow those footsteps thinking this guy's done such great things. But I had to tell the story and say, no, it isn't great, it's terrible. And this is why.
Do you think that was also an age thing? As you get older, you start to reflect back on life? People
naturally start to rehabilitate at the age of 40 years old. You know, I'm a calculated person as well. You know, I don't take anything for granted. I'm always looking for opportunities. You know, winning never quits, even if you're in prison. And I looked at life and thought to myself, I'm at an age now, I'm in prison, I shouldn't be in prison at this age. If I come out of prison, or for the rest of my life, whatever I do has to become a statement. I refuse to fail. I refuse to be a failure. And one night, you know, was in my cell and I read Gladstone, and Gladstone quoted that 10,000 learning hours makes you, you know, an authority on a subject. And I thought, well, I'm in here for all these years, and if I spend 8 or 10 of those years, you know, just a regular day, taking in the environment that I'm in, you know, productively, not just sitting and going doing gym or doing another crap that a lot of prisoners do, but actually starting to do courses, work in different departments in the prison, you know, from a listener to healthcare to, you know, activities hubs to all these kind of places. I can understand how the system works, and understanding how something works, that then makes you, I think it's put authority in it. But one thing you've then got is lived experience, which all these people who are positioned in government and in higher paid jobs and run charities haven't actually got experience, most of them, or the two combined properly. So I thought I've actually can create a asset base here that people just can't get. I've got access to this. And I thought, this is something I'm going to do. So that was my first, you know, grab at, I can set up a charity when I come out of prison, because I will come out one day. And when I do it, I can do it and I can compete with anyone that does it. And I, you know, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't just charity. I looked at other businesses as well that I could look at and take advantage of a really bad situation. You know, someone once said to me, you know, even rock bottom has a gutter, right? And it's true. You know, you can continue to go down and down and down, but you've got to stop somewhere, pull the brakes, and you've got to say, right, even though I'm in here, what I'm doing is going to elevate me and watch me climb. And I did. I climbed through the system from category A to B to C to D, coming through it. Along the way, I took advantage of those. You know, I secured story rights of some of the people who were very high-profile prisoners in the attempt one day I would translate their stories into books, into films. You know, I took every asset that was around me that people would look at as, you know, not even look at it as an opportunity, but I looked at everything as an opportunity.
Where did that mindset come from? Because
my mother.
Okay, because when you hit rock bottom,
Yeah.
right, and trust me, I've been there too. I worked my way back up. It takes a certain type of man to rebuild, because you've got two options, right? You get up and you climb, or you stay down there,
Yeah.
and you just wallow in misery, right? Alcohol, drugs, depression, you know, self-pity, etc. It takes a certain type of man to rebuild. What was going through your mind? What mindset did you have to say, do you know what? There is still opportunity, even when people think that you're in jail and there's nothing, right? But four walls, there's opportunity to create. So tell me about, you said it was your mum. So explain a bit more about that.
So first of all, to answer the first question that you said, you can get knocked down and you can get back up. A lot of people can do that. What people fail to realise is it's not just about getting up, it's about what you do when you get back up. That little piece there is the really important bit. My mother, she came to this country with absolutely nothing in the 1950s, just after the Windrush had arrived. Her spirit was one of, I must succeed by all means necessary and help and bring my family with me. And, you know, she worked every hour God sent, you know, and her idea was to have her own property where she wouldn't be subject to, you know, slum landlords and, you know, have those conditions, but build well to build property, buy a property and have property that she could then get her relatives over and they could live there and her fellow people from the island could come over and they could have something to do. But you couldn't do it back then, particularly back then, because the system wasn't built for it. So if you had a job, you couldn't get a bank account, just how the mechanics of it was. So she created, or she didn't create, she, you know, brought together a partner system, which was a community bank, which meant people trusted her as a banker. She was trusted in that environment. People who had jobs for the first time, who wanted to set up a business, who wanted to buy a property, couldn't go to the bank. So collectively, she would get them all to pot a certain amount of money in a pot, and she would effectively be the banker who would hold the pot. And people could, you know, that could run for 2 years, a partner, with up to 100 people involved in it. The money was then collected and it was dispersed. And sometimes people could have 2 or 3 drawers, what they called a pot, collectively together. So this was the pot of money that was used for people. There was lots of West Indians, particularly in our area, their first home. So lots of those huge Victorian houses you see that now sell for, you know, millions upon millions of pounds in those areas like Ladbroke Grove, Notting Hill, Stoke Newington, Brixton. They were black owned, you know, in the 60s, because they looked for big homes where they could, you know, bring over relatives, have families and have somewhere they could come. A lot of them, their idea of working hard was to go back and return to the sun. They never went back, they stayed here.
Yeah.
They built, you know, what was here and they made the most of it for their children. And my mum was very much about that. She was about building things, but not for her, but for her community. And I guess that was the next thing that hit me heavily. I'd realised the community that she loved so dearly, I'd been destroying unknowingly, because, you know, what I was doing all my life and making huge amounts of money from it and having all this, you know, glitz and glamour and this lifestyle that I thought meant something, meant absolutely nothing. All it done was destroyed communities. The people who are the real community people, the people who, like my mother, like my father, who people would go to and get sound advice from, you know, people I should have been going to get sound advice from, you know. And it was a question of, my God, I just got it wrong. I thought I had it right all this time, and it was there all the time for me to know.
Your parents seem like amazing role models.
They were.
I've always wondered, when people do crime, right, do you not feel guilt? Like, because I know that if I found a $5 on the floor, I'd probably pick it up and give it to, you know, if it was in a coffee shop, I'd give it to the barista and say, look, someone's dropped £5, because I couldn't take it. And obviously, I know this is a long time ago for you, but I want to understand how the mind works when you're at that stage, how your mind works when you're at that stage of, I'm doing something which is hurting people and is against the law, and it's not good. Was there not guilt?
None whatsoever, for a simple reason.
Okay.
And people don't realise this. I was a drug smuggler, okay, an organised criminal, to the highest level. Not a drug addict, okay? But a drug addict, to understand their addiction is pretty easy, right? Because you say, guys, the junkie takes drugs, they take drugs, they're addicted to it. It's a substance which they can't get out of their blood or their system. Crime, organised crime particularly, is an addiction, okay? It's a dopamine hit, it's an adrenaline rush. So you're not doing it and thinking, I feel guilty, I feel bad. You're doing it because you feel it's pumping your ego, it's pumping your, it's building you up. Just like a junkie takes drugs and it builds them up. Crime builds you up as a criminal. I heard something one day, not even funny, I had to laugh though, and someone said, a crackhead doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm not going to make it happen today, okay? They're going to get high by any means necessary, right? So for someone to not want to get out of their bed in the morning and not do something to, make something good happen, achievement or whatever it is, it can't, the understanding of someone who takes drugs, who goes and does it, even though their life is a terrible mess and state and they, have nothing because of what they're taking drugs. But the effect of a criminal, if you have an addiction, can you imagine this? And that's driving you because you're going for the dopamine hit, the adrenaline rush, and then you're seeing things come from it. So you're not just, going and taking drugs, falling asleep or going into a corner. You're building shit. You're getting stuff. You're getting beautiful brand new cars. You're getting beautiful watches. You're getting all these wonderful things. But on the surface of it, this is, it's, if you was to build a house on sand, as soon as the wave comes in, which is going to be the police and the confiscation orders, it's all gone. But in hindsight, you don't look at it because you've got almost a junkie mentality that you're not taking it on board, that this can't last.
Okay. So here's another question to lead on from that. Addiction is usually the symptom of an underlying issue, usually a mental health challenge or something that the user is trying to avoid facing. Alcohol, drugs will help them escape the realities of their life, right? So you liken being a criminal as being an addict to that adrenaline. So what do you think you were trying to hide? What were you not trying to face that crime gave you?
Okay, so addiction, okay. Why most people take drugs, you're right, it's a hollowness inside, okay? It's a gap they're finding to fill. This is why so many people who are in, AA is one of the successful programs there's ever been. Forget different courses they run and going into, Priory or places like that. AA is the most single, and CSCC is the most successful program ever run because they have people who are their sponsors and they support them, people who have been exactly where they are but have overcome it. And they say two leaning trees bridged against each other become incredibly strong. They bridge for support. So a hollowness, an emptiness or a warmth to be recognised is why people usually get into crime. Don't get me wrong, it can be extreme circumstances. You can be literally stealing food to live, okay? But I would say, in my case, it was a wanting to belong. Now, some people will turn around and say, does that stem back to you being mixed race? Well, it stems around to wanting to be popular. And if you feel an outcast in any way whatsoever, what you want to do is you want to be popular. And selling drugs, especially to people who take drugs, makes you really popular. Okay? Like anything else, if you have something that people desperately want, they're going to make you feel special. They're going to want to, have time for you. And I think to a degree, that was part of it, wanting to be popular and be accepted by everybody. But then after a little while, that goes because you are popular and you think you're popular, but now, you've lost that because I'm past that stage. So what comes next? And what comes next, you keep raising the bar. So you're not just about being, popular or, making some money. You now want to start climbing a pecking order in a very dangerous world of organised crime.
That's really interesting, actually. So I just wanted to get your take on it to see what is the cause of it.
That's what it's, Hollowness. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Everything, every addiction, every person
Yeah.
that goes down a wrong path in life, unless they're stealing for food or someone's got a gun to your head, you're doing it because there's something you want acceptance.
Ego.
You're missing something.
Yeah.
It's all part of acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it all draws from now.
What I found really inspiring
Yeah.
was when you were in Belmarsh prison and you started One Postcode,
Yeah.
right? And you actually started that with another inmate as well.
Very high profile then, mate. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So, when I was at HMP Belmarsh, realisation came, you know, it wasn't just about what I'd done, you know, and the lives I'd destroyed, because that's, you know, rehabilitation, fine. I was getting to that process, but it was also a little bit selfish because I was thinking to myself, I'm a category A prisoner. I need to do something actually to, you know, improve my situation and move through the categories. So you go from category A to B to C to D. As you come through the system, you get more, you know, time for everything. You get let out a lot more. You get better benefits. You know, when you then get to category D, you actually start to go home on home leaves. So, you know, my initial thought was the better I do, the more I progress through the system. Okay. And that becomes a smoother ride. Okay?
How long would it normally take to get through each category?
Well, you know, it's going to take you probably from where I was as a category A, the shortest time you'll get is going to be 5 years.
To get to category D?
Yeah, to get there. Because becoming a category A prisoner means you're exceptionally high risk to the public, to anybody else. And then you can be a category B prisoner and still be in the category A prisons. But then when you progress from a category B prisoner, unless you're doing a short sentence, you find yourself in category C, and category C then means you're heading for resettlement. So they're preparing you to basically get resettled back into society at some point when you get to a DCAT. Now, that process, as I said, there's different ways of, you know, trying to get there. For a lot of people, especially in the category A's, they are serving, you know, extreme sentences because they're all recommended sentences, and 95% of the people in there are murderers. So, you know, murder is a mandatory life sentence. So even though they've got a life license coming off of it, they've got recommendations of 35 years, 27 years, 14 years. They're going to serve that length of time. Whereas opposed to, you know, drug trafficking, that's 40% is what you serve of the sentence. So, you know, even though the sentence is big, you're still going to serve less, but still you don't want to be in an environment of people who have got no focus of going out, of leaving the prison system, because it sets your mind in a very negative place. When you develop into a category C prison, you suddenly start to have a bit more freedom. It becomes more civilized. You're now mixing with prisoners who aren't just murderers or high profile prisoners. You've got guys who are in there, you know, for white collar crime, for less serious things. So the atmosphere is a lot lighter. And then when you get to category D prison, it's almost like you're home, because now suddenly you're actually working out if you choose to work out. You're going home at weekends on, you know, home leaves. And you're actually, you know, you're one step out. You're there. But don't get me wrong, you're going to be shackled by license after your release. And progress for me was about doing a course, which we started off with a friend of mine, Mumbles, Clifford Hobbs. Clifford is a prolifically known prisoner. You know, he was an armed robber. He escaped from prison. A hijack happened on a prison van when he was going to court, him and a co-defendant. A prison guard was shot. He escaped. He was in South America, and then he was in Spain, and they took him from Spain. The authorities in a Learjet brought him back to Britain, put him in the unit, which is the category A, AA unit in Belmarsh. He went to court, fully, you know, armed police, literally, there was armed police literally in the dock with him when he was given his evidence, you know. That's how a risk he was. Yeah. He said 13 years, virtually all of that in the category environment. And like me, you know, he basically was exhausted by the system. And we spoke and thought, you know what? There's actually a really simple, common sense solution to what these kids are doing. And I looked at it and I thought, look, these kids really, if the truth be known, they don't want to kill anyone because they certainly don't want to spend a life sentence in prison. And they definitely don't want to get killed, right? So when you take those things away, you realise they are in a situation where there's no hope. But worse still, if they're gang members, they haven't thought of the repercussions when they get to prison. So it's fine, you can do stuff on the street, you can have enemies in every single corner, because you can duck and dive and stay away from it. But the minute you hit that landing in a prison, imagine every enemy you've created over the past God knows how many years is going to be in that prison. They've already established their friends in there, they've got networks of people in there, and you're in the belly of the beast with no way out of it. So, you know, a lot of prisoners, they find, other reasons. A lot of guys turn to certain faiths because they feel they'll be protected by, moving into that circle. But are they really rehabilitated them? Some of them generally do find the faith. Some don't. They use it for their purposes. Other kids, they get in the prison system. They start to behave like madmen because they want to make a name for themselves. But they're just making it worse for themselves because the prison environment becomes worse and worse, becomes more dangerous, and their sentences, just continues to get increased with no hope. So he said, the guys who are actually in the prison system, who were the big names on the street, where are they now? They're all sitting there with their enemies together, all on what you call a food boat. So everyone's buying the food together as a group, cooking together as a group. And these were the big Postcode rival gangs. But the stories aren't being told of them now sitting together, talking together like you and I are talking together. The stories on the street of these guys are still warring, and there's still wars still going on, and kids every day are still killing each other on these griefs and these beefs that have finished a long time ago in dispersal, but no one hears what's going on. So it's a question of, why don't we get some of these kind of guys who are coming back through the system on what they call accumulated visits, when they come back from, if they're in Full Sutton or if they're in Whitemore into Belmarsh, they would have progressed like everybody else, and get them to come on board as mentors. And what we do is, the typical scenario, Old Bailey is a catchment area for Belmarsh Prison. Belmarsh Prison is obviously catchment for the Old Bailey's a dominantly a murder trial court. Okay, so the kids are coming in now. As soon as they arrive, they're taken into the first night centre. An officer says to them, "Are you part of a gang?" They're not stupid. They think if they say they're part of a gang and they're on remand, so they go to trial, they're found guilty. That right there, saying you're part of a gang, admitting to that, becomes an aggravating factor. That's at least another 3 or 5 years on top of the sentence. So they will say, no, I'm not part of a gang. They're then taken onto the wing, immediately taken onto the wing. So-and-so says, this guy just landed, he killed so-and-so's cousin, or he's this, that, the other. Bang, it's on, right? So then he's probably going to get stabbed. You've got a situation. But the situation affects everybody. It affects me as a prisoner because we're locked down with everybody else. It affects the guards because they're trying to, mitigate the risk and try to get involved. And they sometimes get hit, stabbed, God knows whatever. Visitors are coming in for visits. The place is closed down. Visitors have to turn back. It's a nightmare. Plus the resources. Prisons are already struggling to have guards and let you out for exercise. Then you've got to walk these guys around three-handed around the wings. So it's a question of, I was a listener at the time, so I used to go to safety custody meetings. So I spoke to one of the governors, Beverly Clark, and said, look, this may sound like a long shot, but me and Clifford, we want to actually try to put something together, a course of the kinds, and we can get some guys in and think we can mitigate a lot of these problems and take a lot of the heat off. It was like, there's no way, because you're prisoners, you're high risk, and it's not really heard of. And eventually we wore her down because it was getting so bad in the prison. And she agreed to give us a chance. So we put together a team of guys, 8 guys. But again, these guys have come in from the system, but they themselves have to be taught first. So I describe it as trying to patch a bullet wound with a plaster. You need surgery. So the first thing these guys needed was to understand conflict resolution themselves. They had to understand the basic fundamental things you need to know that what you would use to resolve a situation, and add sense and that ability to know that you were part of that gang, you was part of the situation, and take those assets and use them. So we brought in 8 guys, we taught them. I'd started a foundation, believe it or not, before I went to prison, which, on the surface of it, I was really just doing it as another business. But one of my friends, David Frederick, he had really rehabilitated. He'd done all the courses, and I asked the governor if we could bring him in to basically teach these guys conflict resolution and be able to framework a course that could actually work and put those steps into place. So we introduced, a guy's going down to the first night centre. So when these guys arrive in there, and the guard's going to ask them, they just don't even ask them. They walk up to them and say, look, no, you're part of a gang. This isn't for the security. This isn't for the police. I just need to know what gang you're a part of, because when you go up there, there's going to be conflict. So if you let us know who the problem's with, what gang you're part of, or what gang you've got conflicts with, you're going to be put on a different wing. And during the course of that week, there's going to be mediation between two senior former gang members from those areas. They're going to meet, and we're going to talk about squashing the situation while you're in prison, because they're never going to come out of prison, most of these guys anyway. But the idea they say while you're in prison makes them feel good, right? Because it's not giving up the colours or stripes. We've still got this thing going on, but we're just putting on ice. Anyway, everyone signed up to it. And the conflict was this. Once you sign into this, if you create problem conflict in the prison, once you signed up to this, you're off of our list and you will end up in dispersal, and you will come in contact with every enemy that you've ever had on the street. But if you told a line and you behave, okay, and you don't break the rules or break the pact that we've got in place, you're going to get extra gym session, okay, because they've agreed to give you that, as to get you out to sell more, to be able to give you activity, to take the stress of the trace off of you, okay, and you will find yourself going through the systems into the Cat Bs and progressing. And it was no brainer.
How successful was it?
93% of conflicts that we got involved in were resolved permanently.
And how did that make you feel?
Great.
Do you think that was the start of...
Most definitely.
Yeah. Because that's an amazing thing to do, man.
Yeah, of course it is.
I'm just listening to it now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it seems like such a simple idea.
Common sense. And this is the problem. People talk about common sense, but sense isn't that common anymore.
My granddad used to say that to me.
Okay? It's not common.
Do you think that ended up fueling your journey when you came out of prison? Because when you came out, you were, like you said, you were not reactive, you were ready to this time. Because you started the Reform Foundation before, right?
Yeah.
But you said you weren't really fully committed, you were still doing illegal activity. But now, this is 2019?
Yeah, so what happened was basically, it wasn't my first course I'd done when I was in prison.
Yeah.
I've written other courses. Another one was called Hindsight, because problems are solved, okay, from looking at common sense situations, how to solve them. And I remember going to the offender manager, that's who goes to look to that's what was sentence plan. And I said, look, I'm in there for drug trafficking. What courses have you got that I can do while I'm in prison that will reduce my risk? And he said to me, money management. I said, well, look, in the greatest respect, I've never really had a problem managing money, I'm not disrespecting you, but I probably got a lot more than you, earned a lot more than you, and I could go and earn lots more. So I don't want to do anything about money. That doesn't interest me. What can I do about why I smuggle drugs? And what can I find out what changes it? He said, there aren't any courses specifically for what you're doing. I said, but how many people are in here for drugs? How many people are drug addicts in here? Why haven't you got a course? You've got a course for RAPs, which is for people who are addicted to drugs. They're taken to a part of the prison. They're segregated. They go through this whole thing. And a lot of them then, they start the first step of recovery. But then common sense says, and I think from a business perspective, right? Business is about having a market and people to sell to, having a product, a commodity, and sell it for the best possible price. Any business. Prison, imagine it as a big supermarket, okay? For a drug dealer, they look at that and say, this place is full of customers, okay? I can charge what I want because they can't go down the road and buy something else. So you've got Haven and people in there saying, wow. So when you've got drugs becoming a business in prison for people who are drug dealers, because this is what we know how to do, then you've got drug addicts who are customers. As soon as they come up from there and being segregated, they're put back on a wing, which is full of people selling drugs. So the temptation is too great. That's why the problem of people going to prison and getting on drugs, or people, coming out of recovery and going back to drugs, that's the problem, okay? So resolving that problem means you've got to fix the people first of all that cause the problem, okay? So it was like, why do we sell drugs? And it was put in mind, well, what would I do if I wasn't selling drugs? But assets have I got? Elon Musk famously said 90% of drug dealers are better at business than business professors. Fact, okay? So if you're selling a product which you can't really advertise, that, you know, you've got all the mechanics of being a business person, why don't you find a different product to sell? This is legal, which isn't going to put you into prison. So it was about building ideas as an entrepreneur. What businesses could I give ideas and understanding for young people who are in drug trafficking they could think about doing when they come out of prison? And it starts with building a business plan. And while you're engaging in these kind of things and thinking about this mindset, you suddenly have aspirations for what you can do when you come out of prison. And you suddenly think, well, I don't want to actually get into more shit and trouble because I'm not going to achieve that. Do you know what I mean? So give people hope to actually turn it all around, but you have to be a role model for doing it. You've got to be an example. You've got to be a test plate to say, well, it's not good being an unsuccessful criminal. Do you know what I mean? Because you can get a guy who's a burglar who's stealing people's houses, keep coming around. If he turns up at a prison and starts to say to prison, you know, prison doesn't work, it's no good. The first thing we say is, you don't work, mate, because you ain't made no money out of crime. Not being boastful, breakful or vanity project, I can go to prison, listen, I was one of the biggest drug dealers in this country, okay, and I got work for a hell of a long time. And if I wanted tomorrow, I could probably go back to doing it. But I'm telling you now, it doesn't work. But I'm not saying to you stop selling drugs. What are you going to do? Here's what you can do.
How do people view you when the one postcode idea really took off? I can imagine...
Madman.
Really?
Of course, because people are thinking, well, first of all, listen, understand I'm a prisoner that people look at very special. The system has seen me walk out of a huge £100 million drugs case on national television, okay, in real time, okay? So I remember famously one of my cellmates, he was excited when I came back into Wandsworth and he saw one of the prison officers, the gym officer, the gym screw. And he says to the gym screw, he says, Garth, he says, Pritchard's back, you know? He says he's doing a rehabilitation charity. So the screw goes to him. So is that his latest scam?
Yeah.
Right? Because that was it. He came back to the cell, he said to himself, to tell me that. I said, well, go back and tell him, yeah, right? A leopard may not be able to change its spots, but a leopard can change its fucking mind. Right? So perhaps you should spare that story, actually. Right? But the reality of it is, you can change, but you have to have a reason for changing, right? So if you find something which is better, or something which is morally connecting to you, you won't go back on that road.
When you think back to that feeling, that connection, that moral connection, do you think it fed the part of you that was hollow when you started crime? Did it kind of come full circle and you thought, this is actually what I should have been doing, helping people, really?
Look, I think about it all the time. If I'd followed my parents', mentorship and their guidance, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be probably in a chain of off licenses they wanted me to do, or, some sort of political, I don't know. I would have been somewhere in a completely different space. But I had to go on my journey. Yeah. But understand, when you step foot on that road and you take that first step, it isn't just that one step or that one thing. What you're inviting into your life is all the things that come with it. Yeah. I'm not saying I've had some, really great people in my life and, good relationships, but the kind of people you attract to that life are looking for someone who's in that life. Space I'm in now, I'm with someone who I was going to call my soulmate, okay, for the first time after all these years. Do you know what I mean? Where I know I don't want to go back to that life because I've got too much to lose in my life. I may not have everything that I had at one stage of my life or another stage of my life, but I've got more because I'm happy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But more importantly, I'm coming from the right place because I can stand for something now and know morally and, what I say, I can say with authority. Not thinking to myself, oh, I'm saying that, but I'm a hypocrite to myself, hypocrite to everyone else. I said, no. I now can say what I feel and I can say it with authority. And that's a great space to be.
When you look back at your life now, because we're going to now talk about all the amazing work you're doing, do you look back and reflect and think, all that had to happen? I had to go through all these stages, learn all these lessons, because without that, as you said, I wouldn't have the learned experience to actually help people on a bigger scale. Is that how you come to peace with everything you've done?
Yeah, listen, people always say to me, if you could turn the clock back or, regrets, listen, as Frank Sinatra said in his famous song, regrets I've had a few, far too many to mention, okay? But the reality of it is, if you don't go through those life experiences, you cannot be an authority to say to someone why you should not do that. You know, it's like, I don't know, you've got people who can say things or mechanically tell you things, you know, like, I say this question is this: would you get in a helicopter with someone that's never flown a helicopter but read a manual, or would you get into a helicopter with someone who you know flies helicopters? You're not going to put your life at risk. It's your life you're putting at risk. Yeah. So if someone's giving you advice to do or not to do something, you've got to know that person has been in a hot seat.
Yep. Yep. It's exactly the same reason when I talk about building this organisation. If I'm helping men to heal and improve their lives, I have had to live that journey myself.
Of course.
I can't have just studied it.
No.
I had to live it. And that, especially for men, that trust of lived experience outweighs any book or degree or qualification, because now you actually feel what the other person is going through, right?
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to try to explain to somebody.
It can be the hardest thing. Listen, as men, we all have egos, and we sometimes don't like talking about messing up or our regrets, okay? This is the biggest thing. This is why people take more drugs. This is why people have more drink. This is why people, you know, have more crazy things happen in their life, because they haven't accepted that what they're doing doesn't work. And it's Einstein's definition of madness, right? If you keep doing the same thing and you expect a different result, it's not going to happen. Something has to change. But first of all, for it to change, you've got to accept it's not working. Something's badly, fundamentally wrong with this. And then when you realise in yourself what it is, you've then got to be brave enough to take that secret or that thing that because you need to take drugs, you do bad things, gambling, you hide it. That's what makes it bad, right? But when you can actually go out and you can tell someone, have a conversation with them and challenge that conversation, because you'll know this. When you talk to someone who's denying addiction, they're going to be constantly putting it to the back step. They're going to be avoiding you. They're going to talk about it. They're going to be in a situation where every other thing can be on the table, but facing the problem, the elephant in the room is the one thing they're going to be hopping around in. So you have to sometimes make someone feel comfortable by letting them know, look, and I do this in prisons. You know what I do first time I walk into a prison room? I go into the room like everybody, because in prison everyone's got this great thing, what they've had, what they got, what is it. First thing I say is, look around you. Every single person in this room is a failure, including me, because we've all went to prison. But, okay, in bad times comes opportunity, right? So everyone has opportunity to change their life around, because you're at the rock bottom. You're there, and the only way can be up, right? Unless you're going to stay there and, sort of swirl around in yourself, and, not want to get up, then there is no hope. But the minute you turn and say, well, you know what? I would have come out of this situation. And you say, here's my hand, my brother. I'm going to help pull you up.
Love that, man. That's
all
powerful.
It takes. All it takes.
It's powerful. What I loved about what you just said is, even though you were referencing prisoners, that same ideology applies to any man.
Everything. It applies to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. It's the first fundamental basis of everything.
Yeah. How do you feel, man, when you go into prison and you can help these people? I mean,
great.
It's hard to describe to somebody. I don't want to use the word power, but there's a certain feeling.
It's power.
Yeah, because you know you can help, right?
But it's beyond that. Do you know the feeling of knowing that you're a prisoner and you're locked up and you're reliant on someone opening that door, letting you out to eat, controlling your life, okay? And in not so long a period of time after being that person who's been in prison, or a great example is, I was being carried to court every day in a Serco prison bus, and within a year of me leaving prison, I was sitting at a table with the hierarchy of Serco, talking about bidding for prisons, the £280 million prisons they're building, okay, for the government, and me supplying rehabilitation courses for those prisons. Wow. It's talking about going into prisons which, you know, not so long ago you were an inmate in, and having phone calls from prison governors and from, you know, officers on those wings, you might have come in contact with you back then and say, wow, I know you said you were going to do this, but Jesus Christ, you're doing it. You know, can you come back to the prison because we've got this age group of kids coming in, or we've got this happening, and help us understand what's going on? You've got no idea how powerful that feels.
Do you ever sit and ask yourself, why me? Like, why were you given this ability to be able to reform and help? Because there's loads of people who go for prison and they just don't care.
Yeah. No, because I was chosen to do it. And
describe that. You say chosen.
I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. You know, we're all put on this earth for a reason. And we walk around, you know, in this kind of forever abyss. We travel, okay? But we never know our real purpose. But that's why we do so many things sometimes. But there's things sometimes, it might just be one thing. Could be lots of things. In my life, it's been a few things. But we're just finding it. Understand this, right? If you're a spiritual guy, you'll get this. Every single one of us has this sat-nav within us, all right? And this sat-nav is going to take us to a great place. It's going to take us to a great destination. Where it all changes, and it will happen to you, and reflect this, when you go home tonight, reflect on this, right? At some point in your life, you don't listen to sat-nav. You stop and ask someone directions. A little crossroad comes along, you stop, and you don't, for some reason, you don't listen to that sat-nav, which is in you. You say, excuse me, mate, do you know the place? And he then sends you somewhere, which is off route, okay? And when you're off route, my mother is saying, she says, when you're lost, you walk fast, right, okay? And that's what happens. When we start to go off route, we don't think about, okay, let's stop and track back to where we started and think about how we're going to work that out. We just go further and further and further adrift, all right? So we get so lost one day, we end up in prison, or we end up dead, or we end up completely off the map because, you know, we weren't supposed to go off route. And I just figure to myself now, I let my conscience be my guide and let my spirit guide me. So if it's telling me to do something or it's taking me somewhere, I follow it. And, you know, the whole prison thing, I realised, why is it so simple to me? Why do I see it as so simple? Why are all these problems, you know, why can I look at them and think to myself, it's a simple situation. Why can't it be fixed? Just because through my eyes, I can see the problem. Through lots of people's, they can't.
So you're talking about trusting your instincts, that internal sat-nav, right?
You have to trust, listen, you have to, in life, all right, so I'm not saying to someone, especially if you've got bad instincts, all right, that it's the be all and the end all, but you got to get it. In life, we don't know everything, all right? In life, there is instincts we have and gut feelings we have. Sometimes we have to follow those.
How do you start to trust them?
You make sound decisions.
But how do you know they're sound decision?
Well, first of all, I never used to take calculated risks. So saying you never take a risk, you know, it doesn't make you human. But you must calculate the risk. You must calculate, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going somewhere or doing something, what could go wrong, you know? And once you realise what could go wrong, if you're going to walk into there, you've thought of everything. What happens when you don't do that and you just do things in a wing and a prayer, it's inevitable. You know, you might be lucky once or twice, but you're going to crash somewhere along the road. So it's a decision-making process you have to do. Every situation you get, can I do this? So I say to myself, where am I? Where do I want to go? And how do I get there? Those are the three important things you ask us every single day. I get up in the morning, those are the three things. Where am I? Where am I today? Okay? And that might be sitting in a chair with you, say, where am I? I'm here. Okay. Where do I want to go? And that might mean, do I want to do a podcast? Maybe it's a good idea. But how do I get there? You think, well, I know this person, that person, that person, and it's an idea. You might try to say, where am I? I'm here. Okay. Where do I want to go? I want to do it. But you say, okay, right, let's think about this. It's not a good idea because I'm going to spend a load of money on sound, lights, 50 other people are doing it. And these are calculated decisions. And this is decision making that you tend to be able to do. And you can do it quickly. It's not a thing you've got to sit there and take forever doing it. You can pretty much just weigh up a situation in half an hour and know if it's a good idea or it's a bad idea, or if it needs a bit more thought to progress, you know? And I don't know. I love that.
I love that. I ask myself similar questions. I ask myself, is this helping me become the future version of myself I want to be? Mm-hmm. Is it making me feel good or feel bad, right? And is this pulling me towards where I want to go or pushing me further away? That's how I also help with decision making, because I think a lot of the times we make decisions that aren't in our best interest, right? If you were to think to yourself, what would the future version of myself that I want to be do in this situation? You then hold yourself to a higher standard, right? Because you all want to be better. We all want better lives and to do more. But sometimes we just normalize what's around us and we get used to it. And sometimes what we do actually takes us a step backwards. But I think asking yourself similar questions like you did in that situation is really powerful because it helps you make better decisions. Little decisions, I find, are the ones that eventually lead to a bigger wrong decision in the future. We tend to think our life gets impacted by one big moment. It's usually it's little decisions that compound over time. And like you said with the sat nav, you end up realizing you're over here when you're meant to be over there. Okay. Because it's consistent bad decisions and you're down this road. That's right. And now you're thinking...
You're off the scale, but more to that point is the most important thing, and this is real simple. Maslow hierarchy needs puts it out real simple. All the basic stuff, you know, the caveman stuff, food, roof, you've got to look at the top. And when you get to the top, there's a thing up there which says self-gratification, philanthropy, okay? Yeah. This is the top bit. And where's that top for me? That top is legacy, okay? Everything else is replaced now because I've done all that stuff. So there's one place I need is legacy. So before I even start any project now, I say to myself, what legacy will that leave behind? Okay. And by taking that thinking pattern on board, it will be, well, what good will have come of this project? Okay. And you must say that to yourself now. If you don't, you should.
I do.
And it should be, when this all comes to an end, or I give it to someone else to do, what impact, long-lasting impact will it have, and what changes will it have made that people will remember me? I don't particularly want to be remembered just for the things I've done, and I've done a lot of things. What I want is legacy for my parents, who are, you know, are very, you know, passive people. They were people who are very humble. Yeah. They wouldn't want anything, but I want them to be remembered because I'm the voice to be able to do that, because their moral compass was on point, mine wasn't.
That's my driver as well, legacy. Same thing.
That's it. So we have to, you know, as I said, we share the same path on the same road, you know, and it's not a race to get there. Yeah. You know, it's getting there without breaking down. That's important.
It's interesting having this conversation with you. You're more spiritual than I thought you were. You've got a mindset which I can relate to implicitly. Do you feel that's been part of your journey?
How do you think, right, someone like me could go through all I've been through, all the places, all the situations in my life without being a spiritual person? It's physically impossible.
What does that mean to you, being a spiritual person?
It's powerful. It's empowerment, because it allows you to put yourself in a higher authority, okay? Because you're not putting it all on you. And sometimes, you know, listen, man, the glory can be yours, but you know, the victory can be yours, but the glory's got to be God's. Yeah. It has to be beyond that. It's got to be something that you may achieve it, but you can't achieve something unless something has driven you to do it. And that's just maybe your parents, maybe people who have been people in your life. You know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, okay? You know, so if we've got greatness, we haven't just got greatness. We're standing on someone's shoulders who actually didn't want the limelight, but they've given us the wisdom to take with us to let us shine, you know?
How do you help a man who hasn't necessarily gone through the journey of hitting rock bottom and rebuilding? Because I think that journey for a man is a powerful journey. It makes great men.
Of course, right? It does.
Breaking down and rebuilding, right? Men who want to change and want to improve their lives, but haven't necessarily hit that rock bottom and may never hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. How do you communicate that spiritual essence you hold, this desire to empower and improve? How are you able to translate that and share that with someone who may not be able to understand the experiences you have?
I think the easiest way to do is, can you look yourself in the mirror? Okay, and say to yourself, I am the best version of me that I want to be. That's not vanity. Yeah. That's a conscious thing to say to myself, well, what can I achieve? What was I put on this earth to achieve? And what am I falling short on doing? You're not going to do all of it.
That's a tough conversation.
Yeah, and you have to do it with yourself.
Yeah.
It's not with another human being, because you understand you better than anyone understands.
Yeah.
Okay? But you've got to find you before you can have a conversation. Okay? So then you can find yourself and looking at yourself and reflecting and saying, what can I do? What have I done? And what can I change? Or what can I still do? And when you look at those things, and you can start by writing them down. And, but most important thing, you have to, look, a winner never quits, okay? And you've never actually lost or failed if you don't throw the towel in. So you can have an idea, you can start an idea and it could be paused for 10 years, 20 years, but you can go back to it because it's still something you wanted to do. It just means you're more experienced, 20 years experience behind. You can do it now because you're better at it. You've got the assets, the funds, you've got the ability, the knowledge, the skills to be able to do it, the contacts. So I'm a collector. That's what I do. Okay. I'm a guy that collects people. I collect assets. I collect things. All right. And I know, and everyone says this to me, and I mean, people are very substantial people goes, this guy, Andy Pritchard, has got the most maddest black book. Right. He can get people all over the world to do all kinds of mad things from every possible thing you could imagine. Reason why? Because I've lived a very full life and I come in contact with lots and lots and lots of people, but meeting that person or getting the best from that person, or that person getting the best from you, may not be that particular time because the moment isn't needed. But it could happen 5 or 10 years, time from now. And you think, wow, I remember that person, they do that. Are they still doing it? You can pick up the phone to them. You do it. That's why I say, listen, I'm not saying that every relationship in your life is going to be a good one, but if you're going to burn your bridges, burn them to light the way, okay? Or don't burn them. Leave them there to go back and cross them,
Yeah.
It's a very common sense situation in life, but it takes a hell of a long time to get to understand it,
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it, because even before we start recording, you said to me, what kind of guests are you looking for? Let me see how I can help you.
Yeah.
No one's ever asked me that.
No, because they're selfish.
But it's very true to how me and my business partner, Amit, how we operate. We always try to help people because one is just being kind. It's a nice thing to do. But you never know when that person may remember you and say,
Correct.
oh, do you know what? You need to meet Amit, or you need to meet Narup or Andrew. And that connection comes. And
Correct.
I love the idea that don't ever burn any bridges.
Never know, no.
Because you don't know where you're going to be.
No.
You don't know who you might to lean on.
Listen, you might have to burn them sometimes. But if you burn them, light the way with them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Course, yeah.
Because some bridges can be harmful or destructive to you.
Yeah.
But
Positive
generally
relationship.
speaking, any positive aspiration, you don't destroy. You don't, because you might have to cross back over that path.
Yeah.
And listen, there's a saying I've got, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah.
That's one of the most sayings I use the most, because a rising tide lifts all ships. So if you're doing good, I'm going to be doing good. If I'm doing good and he does listen to me, he's doing good. And if everyone suddenly is doing good, the tide's lifting and everyone's boats are sailing. The minute that, someone's doing bad, don't take enjoyment in that. Because it could be your boat that's stuck. Do you see what I'm saying to you? Don't take enjoyment in that. If someone fails, don't take enjoyment and say, oh, well, they failed, and you're laughing at them, because you could be the next conversation, that's being had about. So
this philosophy, this way of helping people, is that what you do through the AP Foundation?
Yeah, so AP Foundation, as I said, it's been more of a labour of love more than a mechanical thing where you're doing it purely for the money. Because, listen, I know a situation is this, to be a voice in a system where people don't have voices is a really powerful thing, because I know that I've been there, I've seen it, you know what I mean? I know it's like a prisoner, okay? And to know I could actually be someone that could probably speak to a minister in government, okay? I could speak to a top prison governor. I could speak to judges, okay? I can have conversations now with all these kind of people, and I do. And I can say, look, I think the sentencing laws are really bad for this reason. Or I think, this is a good cause you should bring into the prison for this reason. So I can hold my own, because I can say, well, who are you? Export authority on the subject.
Yeah.
That's where it stands.
Can you tell me a moment through your work with the AP Foundation that really stands out, with something that you're really proud of that happened, to give our viewers and listeners an example of the incredible work they do? Something that stands out that you think, this really made everything made sense of everything that you're doing?
It'd be impossible to specifically point at one specific thing. But I think probably if I take two scenarios, okay, that I can say to myself, I feel really, really, proud. I feel like I've accomplished something from that. I think one of them would be a bizarre event, basically, where I went to a knife crime event and I noticed the judge who was sitting, in the court at the Old Bailey. He seemed to be staring at me, but I couldn't recognise who he was because obviously it was out of hours event where they had a knife crime convention where kids were brought in from the local Peru centre, and all the kids who were there basically were, on the verge of it. They had a parent talking about her son being murdered, how horrendous that was. You had a senior barrister talking about her hardships she'd had in life, and now as a top murder QC talking about what was so wrong. You'd had someone who was part of a gang and they were talking about basically, why the whole gang thing was terrible. And it was a great event, but then the judge he kept on looking at me and I was like, why does this guy keep looking? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then at the end of the event, they turned around, I won't say his name, it said, we'd like to thank Judge blah, blah. And he was the one that sentenced 15 years in prison.
Right.
And I was like, wow. And I thought, what do I do? This is a really different, unique situation.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've got to speak to him. I've got to do something. So I waited until they left the public gallery where the kids were all sitting. I walked up from, through there. The Old Bailey courtroom number 1 is a raised platform. I walked up on a platform and I walked up to him. And he was this shorter judge and stuff, looked completely different because, of course, when he said he was big and his gown on. And I gave him a card. Automatically, when he saw the AP Foundation, I'm at this event, of this kind. His first impression was obviously I'm there in the capacity of, a charity, which I was.
Yeah.
But I said, you don't remember me, do you? And he was like, no, but he's now thinking, this charity. I said, you sentenced me to 15 years in prison. And he was like, oh my God, what's your name? I said, Pritchard. He was like, oh my God, of course, like you are. Like, because I was quite a notorious person. Yeah. And he was like, I said, I really feel sorry that I, gave you such a big sentence. And I laughed. I said, look, don't fuss about anything. I said, I've rehabilitated, and then it was such a bizarre thing. It was a trauma that I dealt with. And I went home and I was like, wow, I can't believe this happened. And I,
did it feel like healing?
Well, it was better than that. I went and done a LinkedIn post just to say this extraordinary had happened. And another judge that I know who runs a knife crime magazine, he went back and said, this is amazing, Andrew, because as a judge, I've always wondered how that would be to actually meet someone who had sent to prison and actually they have changed and see them, because that never happens. It's, unheard of. And another judge as well, who was on the network, she came back and said, this is quite extraordinary, and stuff. And it's interesting to see, how that can happen. And then they said to me, he offered me if I wanted to perhaps be put forward to speak at the judges' convention. And I've paused for a minute and thought, hold on here. Let's just take a stock of this. Not so many years ago, I was in prison as a high-risk prisoner. And now I've got a good possibility of going and speaking at a judges' convention to tell judges about the sentencing system. Does it work? And maybe, balance things to a degree. And I thought that's a powerful thing to have or to be part of.
Yeah.
And another insane thing as well was Whitemore, high security, where I was, big prison. I got a call email one afternoon from one of the officers who knew me from the prison, and to say that Whitemore was changing into a huge prison. It's life is prison, but it's saying basically, well, the whole wing has been dedicated to prisoners, basically, with young offenders who are doing big sentences, like 30 years upwards. And he said he'd heard the stuff I was doing, he'd heard about it, and he invited me if I'd come and help, talk to the governor and work with him at Whitemore to, work with young people coming into the system. And I thought, again, that's it's insane.
Yeah.
When you think of this.
That must feel I'm saying feel good, but it's probably undescribable, right?
Yeah,
to
completely.
see now you're treated as a different person.
You're completely treated. It's a different level of authority.
Yeah.
You know.
So what's your goal with the AP Foundation? What if someone said to you, what do you do? Are you aiming to do? Is it to help rehabilitate people, or is it much bigger than that?
I think there are 5 steps.
Yeah.
Okay, to crime and prevention.
Yeah.
And step 1's always intervention. You need to get to people before they get there. Because if you can get there and you're able to put across and give opportunities of understanding to younger people, particularly before they hit the prison cells, you would have changed their life completely.
Yeah.
If it's too late and people are in prison, you don't give up on them. Prison's used as a storage warehouse facility for people. It's not a place of rehabilitation. And, it's 6 to 1, right? So every pound spent rehabilitating someone saves the taxpayer £6. That's what the cost of reoffending is in this country, right? Wow. To focus on rehabilitation, but not just ticking the boxes, actually saying, what is it you wanted to actually do? Let's not think about, what you've done. We know what you've done. Let's deal with that. But let's think about what kind of life would you like to live? And how can we do that without you coming to prison? And opening opportunities up and let people take time and study towards things where they can actually become, some sort of positive member to society when they come out of jail. I think that would be a great achievement. And then it is practical stuff, being able to get the best from people, and that process is usually, and it's an old cliche, it's going to be one of finding training, offering them employment, and there's a whole, understanding I've got of that, which I think would work brilliantly, applied to people learning certain skills in certain sectors, particularly in terms of housing, being able to upskill them people. They could be building, units and spaces which want to be used to kind of house people, who are vulnerable or people who are coming out of prison, and then create a help towards the housing problem in this country today, which is a huge problem that we have, and building a legacy, building something to say this model was introduced. I even believe another model which is insane to most thinking people, but again, because I've lived it, I say when these guys go in and they're doing 30 years in prison, I get it, they've killed someone, right? But the minute they go in, it's a battle, as I explained earlier, from getting in there to making themselves a name, and they've got this long sentence. So anyone that comes in and is following their example, you understand what the problem is in prison. Everyone's following this person's example, worse and worse and worse. If you turn and said, well, from the day you walk in there, you're still quite a relatively known person on the street, there's a possibility that you can get 5 years off your sentence, a reduction of it. Because after 5 or 10 years, people is usually starting to rehabilitate, okay? If you set them from the beginning that there's a benefit at the end of this, if you work with the kids who are on the street in terms of mentors, to tell this is a lie, all this killing of each other and these enemies, when it goes, it all changes, and what it's really like when no one's sending you in money. You realise you're some sort of burden to your parents and people that you love because they go and visit you up and down the country. It's not a nice situation to be in. So when you're getting involved, someone gives you that gun to hold on to, or that knife to, or tells you to do some crap, it's going to get you to a place like this. This is what it's really like in here. And someone can make a change. Listen, if it's economic, do you know how much a murder costs? By the time you have someone for 30 years in a prison, by the time you pay for the court trials, by the time you pay for all these things that go on with it. So if it's about money, it makes complete sense. If one person just saves one life, you save the taxpayer millions of pounds, but not only that, you change the environment, hundreds of people in prisons, because everyone's looking to behave themselves, and it sets an environment completely different. But I get it, there are victims, and no one's going to say, guy murdered so-and-so, and he's getting set time off his sentence. But if you're looking at practicality and you aren't being selfish, and even if you are a parent of a victim, you're thinking, well, maybe what this person now does, if they've generally learnt their lesson, will save someone else's child getting stabbed. Do you know?
So really, when you're helping these people, you're helping them to find their why, to not to do it, and the why they should rehabilitate, right? That's in essence what you're helping them find. Yeah.
So look, example of why, this whole why Apple marketing concept, the reason why do people buy Apple phones? Because, Nokia make phones, but Apple phones we like to do stuff. But then you just don't buy the Apple phone, you buy the Apple iPad, you buy the Apple TV, you buy the Apple AirPod. The reason why you buy it, and the reason why is because all these other companies make this stuff. You buy Apple because Apple doesn't say to you like they'll do. This got this megabytes. It's got this. It's got that. You just buy it and you know it's going to do really good stuff, and you trust that brand. Now, finding your why or you means if you can do something, have confidence that whatever you do, you're going to do it. My mum used to say, "Do something to the best ability, or just don't do it." All right. So finding that reason, as I said, for you. Now, my example was, and it's always been this way: if you can't get a job, make one for yourself, right? If you get stopped or you get blocked, find a way around it. And that's a smuggler's mentality. You know, it's not stop at the door. If the door's not open, you get through a window, you dig a hole underneath, you get round it, okay? Why don't you have that understanding in business in the same way? And when you do it, you realise there's a marketplace for it, as Apple do, as companies do. There are millions of people that struggle the same with the problem, but what they don't do is they don't have the bravery to set it up and say, I'm going to challenge it. I don't have the bravery to say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to set it up and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it differently because all these people need this, they want this. So watch my lead. Entering into the book, you know, as I said, it was important for me to write this memoir. I took over 6 years to write it. You know, it's 50 years in the making. That's how I describe it. Yeah. And it was challenging because publishing companies do not want to publish a book 140,000 words. They make no money from it. Okay. They don't want a book that's going to, you know, take you through all these journeys in life. It's going to be complicated. It's about mixed race. It's about, you know, Windrush generation. It's about East End. It's about drug trafficking. It's about the music industry. It's about all these different things. But you got to understand, before I let anyone break that up and start chopping off bits and pieces of it, it's not the story that needs to be told. It's a historical document that I've produced.
So this is Empire of the Dirt.
This is Empire of the Dirt.
Which is your book that's going to be released.
And
we actually met because of your previous book, Urban Smuggler, right?
That's right, yeah.
We did a photo shoot for you and then we came to Shoreditch House or Soho House.
Yeah, Shoreditch. It was Shoreditch House. Yeah, just recently opened. Yeah,
and we were documenting the event. This is very early on in
2008. This was. This is when you guys were more or less starting out as aspiring photographers.
Yeah, but you weren't happy with that book, were you? You said it was heavily edited.
Because what happened there was basically it was a huge case I was involved in 2004, 2006 was acquitted, and after that it was highly publicised. And I had various publishers that came to me because they wanted, you know, the book to be published. And I myself thought I'll take advantage of getting a book, but I had never written a book before. The longest thing I probably wrote was a prison letter, you know. I didn't have time to ever study like that in my life. And a ghostwriter was allocated who was going through some personal problems of his own. He basically, you know, dropped the ball, and it was a big rush towards the end of it. I leant on a friend I knew, Norman Parker, who'd written a number of best-selling true crime books. He came over, I went over to Valencia, and he put together a book literally in 14 days, which is unheard of, 90,000 words. So most of the material he'd, you know, taken from hearsay, and it was a book that was put together which fitted a, you know, true crime audience, and people enjoyed it. But it wasn't a book, and there were many untruths in it, because obviously the whole story of what had happened with the, you know, the cocaine and coconuts case, as we know, that was, you know, very far-fetched, for the simple reason I hadn't been convicted of police corruption and paying off corrupt police to, you know, destroy the case. So obviously, you know, I've been convicted of that now. So for the first time, the story has been able to be told. But it was all just about the story of, you know, drugs, or a story about smuggling drugs, exciting as that may seem. It was about putting the record straight. And so many things in my life have got great significance. The stories have to be told properly. And, you know, I can tell you now, one of them was the warehouse party scene, because Summer of Love was an amazing time, the second Summer of Love, where so many people integrated and mixed. I mean, as you experienced it, you would never understand what I mean by this. There was no, you know, conflict or problems we have today with race and problems with people and all this horrible stuff that goes on politically now. For the first time ever, black, white, every colour embraced each other, and it was safe because people go 10,000 to a party and you were safe. People weren't going to rip your watch off your hand or anything was going on because people will say it was drug induced from ecstasy. Perhaps it was, but generally the atmosphere of people was different. And there are so many people who are in this industry today. I mean, arts in terms of film, photography, music, from different cultures whose parents sent them to university to go and study, engineering or something like that. And they met and they mixed with people in the industries and they became film producers. They became photographers. And it opened up a whole new aspiration towards, arts in this country, which we have to give credit for. Musically, all these genres of music, which have now, progressed and been passed on, from garage to speed garage to jungle to drum and bass, even to grime. It all comes and it all stems from there. In fact, beyond there, my story tells the story of sound systems and reggae culture, which again doesn't get the credit it needs, that when you understand that journey, you understand why and how the music did come through. And warehouse parties were not new. We've been doing blues parties in houses for years, since the 50s. They were effectively just what we put on a warehouse. Do you know what I mean? With a different kind of music. So that story was important and get it documented correctly, because people who have, one person particularly tried to document it and it fabricated full of lies and exaggerations. So it was important for me to tell it what it is, because the story is better than any fabrication you could create, because it was that great. And, all those journeys, those troubles and those, all those challenges to get Reggae Sunsplash here again was a huge, thing to do. And now looking at Reggae Festivals, the biggest ticket at the moment. And some of these things I've been through in my life and journey that's taken me, as I said, with my, personal relationship now, where I am, restarting really at this age, 2-year-old daughter who's apple of my eye, a partner now that, I give hell to, but, puts up with me. It's stuff here that becomes real. And it's that journey from the beginning of not just my journey, my parents' journey, and that whole generation where they went, documenting that, making it correct, factual, understanding those systems. We talk about the partner systems, all those things immigrants had to, find the devices and ways to move through the system, what they went through, documenting that properly. What I went through as a mixed race kid growing up. That trigger moment when I realised, actually, I feel empowered now, that was acid house time, because black and white all mixed together. That was the mixed race thing gone. That point at prison, that cat and mouse game, to seeing my dad come up to prison and get the realisation. That's what happened. Seeing those kids in the prison system who were killing each other, when I realised, because if I wasn't doing the drugs and the things I'd been bringing into the country, none of this, a lot of this wouldn't have happened. So learning that journey and reading about that journey, and it's not just about glitz and glamour, it's about hitting rock bottom. It's about literally having nothing because you're stripped to the bottom, but then being strong enough, resilient enough to get back up. And not just for the sake of wanting to make money, because I've done that a few times, but getting back up to say, I'm now got a noble cause, and whatever I do this time, I'm doing because it was meant to happen. So if there's projects there that I left sitting for 20 years or 30 years or started, I've come to finish them all, but leave a legacy behind with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, this sounds like your book is your legacy, but it also must be quite a cathartic experience, like putting everything down.
Yeah, huge.
Going through it. There's probably some stuff that you put to bed, you had to come face to face with again.
Absolutely.
But now it's there, it's written, right?
You've got to face it honestly as well. like we just had a conversation about photographs. Sorting through photographs to capture a lifetime is a very difficult thing to do. But you've got to do it. You've got to, because some things will mean a lot to you, certain pictures, as you said, and some will appeal more to, the general public, what they might but you try your best to document that journey. And, there probably will be another book coming at some point,
What do you want people to take from your book?
Study, a historical document. I want criminologists to be able to pick it up and have it as, recommended reading, because it should be in universities. For anyone studying criminology or aspiring, lawyers, barristers, people working in the criminal justice system, they should read it to understand how it really works, nuts and bolts of it. Young people that are involved in music today who really want to understand that journey of where it all came from, all the modern stuff they like today, and the whole dynamics of that, People should read it. People who want to understand what it was like, you know, during the Thatcher days and how that works. People who are mixed race who want to wonder, you know, who've gone through that identity struggle, or, you know, people who, you know, wondered if they're mixed, half Jamaican or whatever. What is it like there in that environment? And could I survive in that environment? You know, so all those journeys and resetting your life constantly, every time you fall, you know, rather than press the fuck it button, which I used to do, and go and do something bad, pressing the reset button to go and actually do something which makes sense.
Yeah, I love that, man. As we come to the end of this conversation now, you've said so many amazing things about rebuilding, inspirational stuff that I've taken from you. This is a men's mental health podcast and a men's mental health organisation. What's one piece of advice that you would like to leave a man or men with based upon your journey, your life, that you think could help him change if he was in a difficult place?
I think, look, where there's life, there's hope. Okay. So, you know, as I said, rock bottom even has a basement. All right. So you might really think, you know, God, there is no more, and, you know, there's no way out of this. There is no way up. There is. Okay. It doesn't matter. There's no harm in taking a breath. There's no harm in saying, I haven't got to rush straight back into this. I haven't got to rush straight back up. You can pause. Okay. You can think carefully about what options there are available to you, because everyone has them. The problem is we don't think about what they are, you know, and it's a question of, as simple it could be, and you do feel that way, and life does look pretty shit deal and everything's down. You get a piece of paper and you say, right, we know all the bad things that have happened. Let's look at what good might happen. Who do I know who may be a good contact? Who do I know? And those three things I'm going to leave them with today are, where am I? And that can be a really bad place. Okay. Where do I want to go? Okay. So everyone wants to know what they want, whether it's, if you're a single parent, they want to see their kid. If it's a person hasn't got something, a property, a house, or something to live, or anything, a business, this is what they want. But the problem we have is you can't go from, where am I here? And this is what I want, and I'm going to get it. There's a big bit there that says, how do you get there? And it's a whole process of steps. And there's not one, you know, textbook model that says, this is the process. You can take other angles, as I said, but they will lead to the same point as long as you think about what you're doing. Yeah, I love that. What's one thing that you think we should have spoken about that maybe we didn't touch on? Look, there are so many things we could go through, and we could speak for hours upon hours upon hours. I think what you need to cover, and what we need to cover, are basic things, right? That understand yourself. And I think we've covered that in this podcast, all right? No matter who you are, before you could be any good to anyone or of benefit to anyone or benefit to yourself, you've got to understand yourself first of all, okay? So that's something I always say to people. Yeah, that's the one. I put up a birthday quote recently, a post on Instagram, and I had a collection of images. And one of the things I wrote was, before you decide who you want to become, figure out who you are. That's right. Right? Because we're so focused on, I want to be this, but do you actually know who you are right now? That's right. Right? And then when I try to say to men, even my family, understand who you are, understand self. It's like it goes over the head. They're like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? So can you enlighten, what does it mean to understand oneself? So look, to me, right, as I said, everyone's a different person. Everyone's got their own, you know, genetic makeup as you see it. To be oneself, be honest with yourself, okay? Do not create false expectations of yourself or try to be somebody else, because you're not that person. You never will be that person. You've got to do you, right, okay? And all that means is, as I said, back to square one. Where am I? Where do I want to go? How do I get there? Just have a clear vision of what it is you would be. All right, I'll give you a very quick example. You know, this is my take on rehabilitation. A kid gets arrested for, I don't know, stealing cars, right? Potentially, the kid might have an interest in cars, okay? So rather than sending him to jail for 6 months where he goes a bit load of criminals and gets worse and then starts to learn how to sell drugs and steal cars, you go to a mechanic who is a guy who's struggling with his business, who is building cars, who's essentially a good role model, and say, rather than money, the money to send to prison, I'm going to give you some money to help run your business, I'm going to give this kid a small wage, I'm going to teach him about cars, okay? So find a mentor, right? So this is the key to people. There are 3 people you need in your life, right? You need to find what I describe as a champion, a mentor, right, and a sponsor.
What's a champion?
So a champion is someone who goes the road with you. So in other words, if you're in a business or you're in a gym training, you need somebody who goes toe to toe with you, who inspires you, you feed off of that person, and that person takes you to that resilience, okay? And that's in life. A mentor's needed when we come to crossroads in our life, all right? Because we all come to crossroads in our life. That's the sat-nav, right? And at that crossroad, we usually take the wrong direction. We need to find a mentor there, a person you can go to who's got lived experience, a life experience, that can give you the best advice to their knowledge. Yeah. It may not be exact advice for you, but he's giving you good knowledge, and you can trust that knowledge. Then the person at the end of the day who is your sponsor, the person who really is the champion, is a person who sits in rooms that you can't sit in or you can't get access to and says good things about you. Okay? And those are the 3 people you have to have in any business, in any, passion in life, because you will get there with those people.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
I've got 2 of them, champion and a mentor, sponsor.
Okay.
Sponsor is the one. That's interesting. I've never thought of that. I've never heard that as well.
Well, you might just get one.
Let's hope so. Andrew, this has been a really, really enlightening, inspiring, and a beautiful conversation.
Absolutely.
I think I've known you for many years.
Yeah.
I've known parts of your story, but I never knew the man inside. And I've really enjoyed it. I don't want to stop really, I'll be honest. Because I think I could keep asking you and learn from you, but I can also feel your passion to want to help. Yeah. And it resonates deeply with me.
Do you know what? And this is a really mad thing. I talk about different things, but you guys have actually, without even knowing it, you've been involved in my cause for years. I'm going to tell you for why.
Nice.
I remember when I first met you guys, and I got a story, and he said to me, about being photographers, because it's very strange to do. It's like not something that we was, photographer, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
He said, they went to do a photograph shoot, I believe, in LA with 50 Cent.
Yeah.
Okay? And done this photograph shoot, and you were living a life because you're around a big artist. You're watching all the people smoking and enjoying and relaxing. You're living that 50 Cent lifestyle.
Yeah.
The reality is, you're taking photographs, you're getting paid to take photographs, you go home and you're a photographer. There are kids out there who are killing each other, shooting each other because they want to live that lifestyle that you hear about on records. And I've done this many, many times. You've probably ears have been burning. Yeah. But I've taken you guys as an example into prisons.
Wow.
And on the street. And I've repeated that story numerous times.
Wow.
Okay? And I've said, just word for word, so anything is beyond your limits. If you become a photographer, or a racing car driver, or a film director, don't think you can't do it. Because what you can do is you can maybe get that life that you're aspiring to get selling drugs or risking your life every single day because you hear Snoop Dogg talk about it or 50 Cent talk about it. But you can actually get there legally and be making money from it and go home and sleep in your bed at night without the risk of the police kicking the door or someone coming and shooting you. Do you see what I mean? So what I said to you, there's more than one way to get there, that destination, but you must know where do I want to go to. So if that is there, it isn't necessarily this is the route. There could be the route is here. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a powerful takeaway.
It's true story. It's fact.
And that's that feels really rewarding to hear that you're able to share that story.
Yeah,
because
so you're doing it right now. Your words is out there. It's in their ears. You may have changed lives already.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Well, thank you for sharing our story, man. I'm just glad to know that we can inspire people through the work that we do. And I think even more now through this work.
Yeah, most definitely. Definitely.
It's actually, I do tell people our story, and I say that we've shot the biggest celebrities, worked with the biggest brands.
Yeah.
But now the impact is more as global, right? Because we can aspire through that way. Oh, I met en route with these photographers, directors. We're creative. We want to do similar stuff. But through the work now, using those skills
Absolutely.
to now tell, which I think is even more important stories, photographing even more important men in my eyes, men who have lived it, men who have been there, men from different industries and celebrities who actually want to inspire and change, I think creates a bigger ripple and has more impact.
And I think also, listen, life is about, you know, and this legacy is important about giving. And not giving in you financially, I'm talking about giving an understanding. When you've skilled something, you become master of that skill. You need to be able to offer that skill to help others.
Yeah.
You know, and that might be young people who are on the verge, guys who are in trouble, kids who, you know, who are on the verge of going to prison, who are going to think, hold on, well, what about a photography class? And the government should back something like that.
Yeah.
Because these are things that young people would like to do, but they don't know where to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Amazing,
filmmaking, all these kind of things, you know?
Well, it's food for thought. Thank you very much, Andrew, man. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy
no problem.
man.
Yeah,
so
no
thank
problem
you.
at all. Anytime.